Hi everyone, my name's Karen Ashford Hatherley. I'm a clinical psychologist with Ashcliffe Psychology, and we run the Matrix program, which is an intensive outpatient program for the treatment of addiction. Today, I want to share with you just one part of what we do in terms of dealing with relapse. And this is a family education component. Every Wednesday night at 9:30, we run a group program for those people who are in our recovery program. They bring along their family members or support people. And this is part of the family and support people learning how to support their person in recovery. It can be a difficult journey for those who have been in that role. And what we find when people join Matrix is that their family members or partner and support people that they have in their life are really relieved. And sometimes they just go, oh, good, I can hand that person over to you now. And we say, well, actually, no, you need to be part of this journey. It's really important. One of the topics that we do is dealing with the possibility of relapse. Tonight, I'm only going to share with you just one part of that, and that is what are the warning signs? So after someone's been abstinent for a while, what are the indicators that tell me that there may be a relapse potentially happening? And this is not just for those who are supporting the person, but also the people in recovery. We usually find that it's around the 6-week mark that the person starts to feel really good. So once they've been abstinent for about 6 weeks, they start to get a lot more energy back, motivation. They start to feel good about themselves. They get good sleep. And in that phase, the difficulty is that they also start to think that they've got it. And these are some of the things you hear them say, I've got this. I know that I'm going to be good this time. I'm going to get through it. With that comes a whole set of behaviours. So once they start to see that their life's getting back on track and they're feeling so much better, they also stop doing all the activities and management strategies that they learned in those first 6 weeks to get to that point. So this is that first step of denying there's a problem. In this phase, they say, no, I'm good, I've got it, I can do this. When people join Matrix, the first thing we start to get them to do is schedule. Scheduling is probably one of the most resisted skills, but it is one of the critical ones. And that is that we take the chaos of their life and help them put in some sort of order, structure and routine and consistency. When people get to this phase at about 6 weeks where they start to go, yeah, I can do this. The other thing that you start to see is they're not scheduling anymore, or they've got it all in their head, or I don't need to do that now. I've got this pattern, I've got it worked out. And so that's that denying that I'm still in recovery. What that leads to is avoiding and defensive behavior. So people may start saying, in particular, the facilitators of Matrix, we might start saying, you haven't been scheduling for a while. And there'll be justifications. No, I don't need to do that now. I know I've got it. Or, oh, I just haven't had the time. And they'll avoid. This is where we lose people the most, where they start to drop out of treatment, is around that 6-week mark, because they do believe that they're on the road now and nothing's going to pull me back. And that's what you hear them say as well. Never want to go back there. So after they're denying that, they're not scheduling or they're not doing all the activities that they did when they first started recovery, they then start to avoid. They start to avoid facing situations, people, or events that are going to remind them, well, when you first started, this was your bedtime and now you're pushing that out. Well, that's a pretty common one for people in recovery. They tend to stay up late. And one of the things we work on is getting a really good consistent sleep routine. So instead of going to bed at 10:30, they're pushing it out. I just wanted to watch this movie, or I went out to this party. I haven't been out to a party for such a long time. No one there was using. So there's this justification and defensive behavior, and they also start to avoid all those good things that they were putting in place. What happens then as a result of that is the crisis starts to build. Because they're not scheduling, they start running late. They're getting stressed now. They might also be taking on too much. So they start to feel good, so they take on more. And this is where we see people lose their car keys, so they're running late. Then they have a minor car accident because they were rushing, or they drop their phone. And those little accidents that happens to everyone time to time. But it's a really significant, critical point. People in recovery in those early stages need to take it easy. We need to be scheduling, because the moment that people start to get stressed, they're going to move into that crisis mode. And that crisis mode also is very similar to the chaos of addiction. Immobilization can happen after that. So problems start to arise and people deny, they don't want to have to face it, so they don't take any action. So they feel that they just want to avoid those problems and they don't start to sort them out. They can get confused because they find that they were feeling really good. Now all these other things have happened, and usually the people who are supporting them in their recovery start saying, look, you're not doing what you normally, what you started to do in recovery. You're starting to behave like you used to when you were using. And the person in recovery gets quite confused by that. And there's that overreaction because they become defensive. You're just not supporting me. Nothing's ever good enough. Here you go again. I've been working so hard. I've got it this time. You just don't have faith in me. You don't believe me. You don't trust me. So you see that overreaction. And of course, that can then lead to depression. So the person in recovery starts to feel powerless. They start to feel disaffected by the other people around them and what's happening in their life. I'm working so hard, I'm doing so much, and nothing ever changes. As that depression sense starts to overwhelm them. Now, at this point is where those intrusive thoughts start to come in. So the moment someone gets into that space of feeling stressed, well, that threshold of pain, if you go by what Gabor Mate says, addiction is about pain. So the moment I'm in that place of depression and anxiety and stress, then these thoughts will start to intrude and they'll start to increase the more I stay in that place. The more I stay in that place, the more I start thinking about it. We call this romancing the drug. I start thinking, or whatever it is you're addicted to. I start romanticizing the thoughts about what that could give me, an alleviation of where I'm at right now. Of course, that leads to that option reduction. The more I think about it, the less I'm going to implement those important strategies I learned when I first entered into recovery. The other thing to think about here is where there's porn or sex addiction or chemsex. I might have been triggered by someone I saw. Doesn't have to necessarily been involved in my addictive behavior, but someone that I was attracted to or who turned me on. And then I start thinking about them, and then I start romanticizing about them. And of course, that's going to lead me into those behaviors I don't want to engage in. And eventually I get to a point where my dopamine is being pumped through, because dopamine gets pumped the moment I start thinking about using or engaging in that behavior. And so my options become reduced, and that then leads me to that acute relapse episode. So all I've covered today is just looking at some of those really critical points that we need to be aware of. And of course, like I said, we usually find, in particular with methamphetamine, that 6-week mark is important because people start to feel good. But it's also a critical point that we know the 12-week mark, and we call that the wall. is coming. And what I've gone through today are some of the warning signs that people in recovery, but also family members and support people or your partner can just start to notice. Having that conversation can be difficult. And this is some of the things we go through in our family education evenings. So we talk to family members and support people with their recovery person who's present about how you're going to manage this. Like when the family member notices that there's been a letting go of some of those good strategies that kept them in recovery, how are you going to have that conversation with this person, and how are you going to receive it? So there's almost like a contract that's drawn up that people can start to say, well, I have to start to listen to people around me because sometimes I'm not the best judge of my behavior and what that means. So thanks for listening. And like I said, family education and the support Wednesday evenings are open to anyone who's supporting a family member, even if the person in recovery is not in the Matrix program. And please feel free to give us a call. Thank you.